Before we begin, allow me to set the scene and explain why this exists. It was Monster Hunter Wilds Beta 2 Weekend 2, the last chance to play the game before full release. My primary goal during the beta periods was to experiment with enough weapons that I could shortlist which ones I would attempt to use progressing through the story on release. Swapping weapons can be an intensive grind, so I wanted to minimize that while playing through the story on stream. To this end, I wanted a roster of no greater than 4 weapon types. During the first 2 beta periods, I focused on weapons I normally use and other Blademaster weapons that I was at least passingly familiar with. For the final beta period, I wanted to spend a bit of time to try out the gunner weapons to see if I could find one I would want to actually use to some degree. You see, I don't really play gunner weapons. I've experimented with them, but I usually only use them for particular cheese builds when I feel the need. Yet, with some of the changes in Monster Hunter Wilds, I felt now would be a good time to attempt actually gunning for once. That is when I decided to design a bit of a trial to test out each of the 3 weapons in question to determine which of the 3 I liked the most. This is a sort of record of the process I used to try out each weapon and determine how I felt about them based on what I consider a minimum viable dataset. This might be interesting, it might be boring. What it will be is a demonstration of my process for determining these things when a new game releases. Numbers won't be discussed because I leave that for full releases. The process I had decided on for this was to hunt 4 out of the 6 beta monsters. Chatacabra, Alpha Doshagama, Balahara, and Gypsaros would be my targets, as they were available as quests at all times. I chose to not hunt Raydau or Arkveld, as I was saving those for the full game, and Raydau didn't even have a quest for me. I had already practiced in the training area beforehand to learn the controls and movesets of these weapons, but I had yet to take any of them on a hunt. I also understood some of the theory behind each weapon from previous entries, though I had some idea of the common advice given to gunners in older games that I could bring into Wilds. Each of these hunts were my first 4 hunts with the weapons in the Monster Hunter Wilds beta, and that is where the majority of the footage in this video is from. I will clarify now that the armor set I started with was a poor pick for gunning. It was better suited for my usual weapon picks in melee. The first weapon to trial was the bow. My plan going into these hunts was to try to make use of the poison ailment as much as I could, and beyond that just attempting to feel out the hit zones and find high damage combos. Starting with Chatacabra, I decided to open with a Tracer Arrow followed by Thousand Dragons. This seemed like a surefire way to deal a lot of opening damage. This combo actually became something I tried to see if I could make a bread and butter combo. A major issue I had with this weapon in this hunt was I would accidentally keep putting away my bow. This is because the combo to equip and fire a tracer shot was left mouse button plus E, and E is also the use item button. I made this mistake frequently because I was thinking of the combo as aiming and then pressing E, which meant I would use right mouse button plus E. The correct thought pattern would be loading an arrow, then pressing E. Another issue I kept having was when I meant to use Dragon Piercer, I would often use Thousand Dragons. This is because the difference in the inputs is whether or not you are holding the left mouse button or not. And I kept pressing left mouse button, resulting in Thousand Dragons. I also just wasn't very good with my coding uptime. After this, I moved on to Alpha Doshagama. Alpha Doshagama is a hunt I don't really enjoy in the beta. I tend to eat a lot more hits against it than I would like, which is less of an issue with regular Doshagama. and this makes me a bit wary of it. In this hunt, I realized that discerning dodge actually restored my stamina. When it came to learning pains, I kept using my charge shot combo when I should have been using my quick shot combo for more arrows when trying to apply poison. The flying swallow shot was something of an annoyance for me throughout this hunt. To use it, you press R after a dodge. To apply your coating, you press R. I would often dodge to escape danger and reposition quickly, then try to apply a coating and then use flying wall shot on accident. I tried experimenting with arc shot here, but I didn't quite figure out the value yet. Balahara was a monster I really wanted to make Dragon Piercer work on. This meant this was the hunt I constantly kept accidentally confusing the inputs for Dragon Piercer and Thousand Dragons. This was exaggerated by the fact that I was starting to consider Thousand Dragons as a potentially good way to apply poison through my. More arrows meant more buildup in my mind, so I wanted maximum arrow count. I also found myself wasting a lot of stamina dodging because I had something in my head that I needed to be rushing up bow charge levels using the dodge to maximize DPS. I think this was a mechanic in older games that was less important now. There is also a continuation of accidental flying swallow shot when I meant to apply coatings. Before I took on the last monster of bow, I selected a new loadout. This was mostly the Hope set with Chatacabra gloves. I ended up selecting a different set for gunning when playing for fun and be real, but this was the set for the rest of my tests. This was a huge aid going forward as it granted me increased survivability and better stamina management, something I found that gunning seemed to want. For the final monster, I started by trying to poison it, before remembering that it is Gypsaros and swapping to exclusively power coatings. I wasn't too confident on the hit zones for gunner weapons yet, and eventually started to rely on Tracer Arrow to help hit the head. I did manage to successfully do the discerning dodge more than usual here, and not just on accident, to help maintain my trick arrow gauge. I found the best way to deal damage if I couldn't line up a good shot on the head was to send a Dragon Piercer into whatever the longest run I could locate through the monster and just trust I'd hit something important. I also started to finally understand the value of arc shot to set up more explosions to detonate with my Dragon Piercer. A major issue I had still was that I kept accidentally using my Thousand Dragons when I meant to use Dragon Piercer. In the end, I actually really liked the way Bo played. It had a fun dance of selecting different shot types, keeping mobile, stamina management, selecting the right coating, and managing the trick arrow gauge for both having access to coatings and tracer arrow. It ended up as my second favorite gunner weapon and will likely be one of the first weapons I diversify into in the post-game content. After that was light bowgun. My plan here overall was to test the effectiveness for the paralysis and elemental damage against each monster before attempting to determine which of the three infinite ammo types was the most effective. Then I would try to learn how to best exploit the rapid fire gauge, wyvern blast, and focus blast ego strike shot of this weapon. Chatacabra was first, and I think it had a thunder weakness, but that might just be the difference between freeze level 1 and thunder level 2 ammo. I also found that it was worth not being too greedy with my wound busting, as if I waited I could occasionally destroy multiple wounds at once, but having at least one of my focus blast ego strike shot ammo on cooldown was fine as they returned quickly. This monster here on out can be classified as just being a good refresher on the basic controls of each weapon, as a punching bag that sometimes punches back. Alpha Doshogamo was a monster I had no plan going in for. I wasn't sure if I really picked up on any elemental weaknesses or not, but I did use plenty of the elemental ammo on it. I tried to use my Focus Blast Ego Strike Shot ammo when certain attacks that caused it to expose a weak spot to Focus Strike, but my timing was seemingly always off. The majority of the hunt was mostly me figuring out how to better execute my chase shots and positioning. Learning to more aggressively use my rapid fire gauge and how to use my Wyvern Blast for extra damage was also something I was trying to do here. I did learn that spread ammo was a reliable pick against this aggressive monster, since maintaining distance could be challenging and it had a large body to aim for. Next was Blademaster, and I suspected that this Leviathan was going to be quite weak to thunder, as it seems to be the starter water element monster. Turns out, it also took decent damage from ice. I was expecting piercing to be a good pick, but it just didn't seem like the head hit zone was big enough to exploit it, and I wasn't sure if the tail was worth it. What this monster did do is teach me how to maintain an optimal distance with different ammo types. Gypsyros was a monster I was well aware that thunder wouldn't be the answer. I was hoping ice would be effective, but ended up underwhelmed. I also remembered that it might have pretty weak shot hit zones on the tail. My plan for this monster going in was to attempt paralysis and then commit to as much damage as possible. I was also pretty happy with that tail hit zone value, wishing I noticed this with bow. I found that normal ammo was actually better than I gave it credit for monsters like this and found myself using it quite a bit. A precise damage dealing ammo right to the head or a small tail hitbox. I had discounted it for the reputation I'd heard it had in previous games. This was a mistake I wouldn't make in the future. In the end, light bowgun ended up as my favorite of the three, only barely edging out bow. The variety of ammo types, the mobility, and the act of using chase shots and the rapid fire gauge to exploit openings really appealed. This meant we were moving on to the final weapon, heavy bowgun. This meant a slightly different combination of ammo types with a slightly different playstyle from before. My plan here was similar to before, learn how well each ailment worked, determine if elemental damage was still viable, and then learn to actually use the weapon. I was more confident in my understanding of hit zones by this point, so I wasn't going to focus on that. Starting back with Chupacabra, I was quite impressed by my thunder ammo damage. I also forgot about my poison ammo for most of this fight, and was shocked how fast I could trigger the ailment. I took this information with me going forward with some plans for Alpha Doshogama. Alpha Doshogama was a monster I had minimal plans for. Heavy bowgun is low mobility, and my main way to handle this monster up until now is mostly to avoid it. This had predictable results. I did find that sleep and then wyvern ammo to wake it up was quite effective, as was dumping as much poison as I could into it. I also decided that spread ammo was far less effective with this weapon than with the light bowgun, so I chose to focus on normal ammo. I missed a lot of my sticky shots, but I did notice that we might have some fairly overpowered slicing ammo this time around. I found out if I could get my wyvern counter to go off, it was a good way to open up Alpha Doshogama, but I seemed absolutely terrible at pulling this attack off. Blademaster was a monster I had no plan for other than to try to cut off the tail, which I did. Poison, sticky, and wyvern ammo have all proven to be highly effective at providing consistent damage at this point. I never got around to sleeping this monster, mostly because I didn't have a chance to before it was already dead. I also think my positioning was improving here, and I was learning to better defend myself. Moving on to the final monster for this weapon, Gypsyros, I didn't have much of a plan outside of how I wanted to open the hunt. Opening up, I knew I'd want sticky ammo on the head to break the crest, and maybe try to sleep bomb and sleep wyvern ammo it to help with that. Most of my ammo options didn't seem particularly promising here for this monster in particular. Poison and thunder were functionally useless. Sleep would be a front-loaded ammo type for a bunch of extra damage with things like wyvern ammo and sleep bombing. And while slicing would be good, it was a generically useful ammo type. I did find some success with pierce ammo as its long range made it effective to pick on the head, but targeting the tail was harder this time than with light bowgun. My final assessment of heavy bowgun was that it didn't suit me. In the end, I found myself liking the light bowgun and bow the most. Heavy bowgun wasn't my thing. It felt too slow to do anything with. With the result of these trials in, I can confidently state that light bowgun would be my gunner weapon for wilds, at least early on. My Blademaster weapons are currently set to be Switch Axe, Insect Glaive, and Hammer. I will be streaming my playthrough over on Twitch. Find the link below. YouTube actually includes the links if you hit the view more button on descriptions automatically if you scroll down a bit now. If you want to see more content like this, please subscribe and set up the notification bell. So, as always, so long, goodbye, and thanks for all the fish.